Welcome to RaboTV, highlighting consumer trends driving change in food and agriculture.
Today I'll be providing you with an update on the markets, and Wes will shed light on record land prices.
Today we welcome Jason Craig from Australia's largest grain growers cooperative, the CBH Group. CBH has taken the lead, securing alternative export markets for Australian barley in the wake of China's tariff announcement last year. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks very much for having me, Claudine.
So what are some of the exciting opportunities for Australian barley?
Look, there's a number of exciting opportunities for Australian barley, Claudine. I think, a couple of key ones, particularly in malting, has been, the Mexican market, which we secured this year. That is quite an exciting outcome, and there's a number of others, including hopefully we can see India in the next 12 months, but also in the feed sector, we can see a lot of interest in markets like Thailand and the Philippines, which has had quite strong demand.
So how has COVID changed the dynamics of the global grain market?
The COVID-19 has had a significant impact on the global grain markets, on demand, on supply, and also operationally, this has impacted the grain markets. And I'll give a couple of examples. On the demand side, without doubt, there's a number of countries that are still suffering from COVID-19, and therefore their impact is seen, with less demand, and most of the demand being very spot. On the supply side, markets like Russia, for example, have added export taxes, and we're seeing some government intervention in certain markets as well. And operationally, without doubt, from a shipping perspective, COVID-19 has impacted ships and the time that they've been in ports. What we've seen is a rapid increase in shipping rate.
So Jason, you mentioned consumers are seeking more sustainably grown products. What are CBH's global customers seeking in terms of sustainability?
Sustainability has really increased in interest over the last 12 to 18 months. This year alone, we've sold about 1 million tonnes of grain into the sustainable markets, and that includes 500,000 tonnes to Europe. But I think importantly, consumers are now starting to show significant interest in where their product is coming from. And this is not just from first world countries, but from many countries around the world. And this is something that we're looking at leveraging by interviewing a number of our customers this year and understanding what those drivers are. If I can just give you one interesting fact, approximately 80% of customers around the world that we export to are interested or see at the importance of sustainability in their programs and are looking to procure sustainable grains. And I think this is an absolutely interesting fact. And, it is great that Western Australian growers and Australian growers can take advantage.
CBH is a near 90-year-old grain handler. Where do you see the future of grain production in Australia?
At CBH, we are very optimistic about grain production here, particularly in Western Australia. And we're forecasting by 2030 that it will increase from the 14 million tonne average we have today to around about 18 million tonnes. So we're investing heavily in the supply chain to ensure that we have an efficient supply chain for Western Australian growers. And despite rainfall continuing to decline, productivity through improved seed and farming practices has really made us very optimistic of the future going forward.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks very much, Claudine, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a really good year for Aussie grain producers, Claudine, and futures near record highs.
That's great for Australian grain growers. Now turning to the US, we're seeing some soft job numbers.
That's right. Friday night saw the release of disappointing US job numbers, but it was a case of bad news as good news as far as equity markets are concerned. Both the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq closed higher as just 261,000 new jobs were added in the month of April. This was far below market expectations and resulted in an increase in the unemployment rate from 5.8% to 6.1%. So why the rally in stocks? Well, higher unemployment makes it less likely that the Federal Reserve will be raising interest rates anytime soon. The value of any asset is simply the sum of all of its future cash flows divided by an interest rate. If interest rates are lower, then valuations are higher, so stocks went up. Curiously, the total number of employed workers in the United States remains about 8 million short of the pre-pandemic highs. Here in Australia, the story is different. The total number of employed workers in Australia is now at an all-time high, which has again stoked debate about how long the RBA will keep interest rates at all-time lows, and whether or not the RBA might begin to reduce the scale of its bond buying program. The relative outperformance of the Aussie economy has helped to boost the Australian dollar, and we are now seeing it not far from the highest level since March 2018. International grain prices have also extended gains late last week. Professional money managers have been increasing their exposure to grain markets as dryness in the United States and South America imposes supply constraints on the market. Low forecast corn yields has also helped wheat futures to rally, as traders price in the likelihood of more wheat needing to be diverted to feed to make up for the shortfall in corn. The US dollar also helped grain prices to leg higher. The greenback was weaker following the release of those soft job numbers, and since global wheat prices are denominated in US dollars, a weaker dollar means higher grain prices. Over the weekend, the UK held elections for regional parliaments and local councils. Boris Johnson's ruling Conservative Party recorded strong results, including the capture of the seat of Hartlepool in the north of England, which had been held by the Labor Party since its creation in 1974. It wasn't all rosy news for the Prime Minister though, as the Scottish National Party came within one seat of an outright majority in the Scottish Parliament, and immediately resumed pressuring Westminster for another independence vote. The markets didn't seem to mind though. We saw solid gains for sterling on Friday evening and again on Monday morning as traders reacted positively to Johnson's strengthened mandate. And that's finance.
Thanks, Ben. Now to Wes to learn whether high ag land prices are sustainable.
Thanks, Claudine. 2020 was the 6th straight year for land price growth, which according to ABARES data is an increase of 41% nationally over the 6-year period. While land price growth has been sharp and strong, we expect prices are sustainable at these levels, with a downward correction very unlikely. In the short term, the fundamentals of the land market remain extremely strong. We've identified that there are 3 main drivers of land prices, being interest rates, productivity, and commodity prices. The explanatory power of these variables was the strongest for cropping lands. These 3 variables achieved an R-squared with land prices over the last 30 years of R-squared equals 0.87. The growth streak for cropping lands has been 7 years, the longest streak of growth in the last 30 years. Over the past 6 years nationally, these fundamentals have been the most supportive than they have over the last 30 years. This strength is depicted by our traffic lights. The cost of funding remains at the lowest point on record. The Rabobank Commodity Price Index remains high, and production levels in 2020 were well above average. Back to you, Claudine.
It's actually really positive to note that land prices didn't decrease during the drought.
Well, during the drought, we saw the number of properties on the market diminish significantly, but it's also important to note that farmers and investors take a long-term mindset when buying farms.
Thanks, Wes. And that's it for our weekly wrap-up of the latest agriculture news.
Join us next week as we reveal new technology developed by South Australian almond producers with the potential to increase food safety across the globe.
Thanks and have a great week.